This time I have a Sony SLV555. This was Sony's first VHS VCR, period. Up until that, Sony was 100% Betamax and, of course, 8mm and high 8 for their camcorders, but they finally caved and released a VHS machine. And what a machine it was. They had two machines, the 555 and the editing-capable 757, and they were actually very good machines. This was Sony's first machine, as I say. I'm told it doesn't work. Do you see what I see? This might be one of the problems with it. It has a HBO video, The World at War, Volume 8. A label fell off of a tape. You think that might have something to do with the fact that this machine's not working? Possibly. There are other things to be considered, though, and I know that those other things are a consideration now because, well, I can see it. I can see right now. Can you guys see what I can see? Well, for starters, that guide is not supposed to be like that. And secondly, this guide over here appears to be jammed. So we have a couple problems. One, we have a seized up guide, P6 guide. Looks like someone's had that off before and they put nail polish on it. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is this guide here is kind of loose. That's going to be the blue gear problem. I'm pretty sure I have one. I'll go check my stock. I do have the replacement blue gear in stock. I also have an original Sony white gear, a brand new one, that's not damaged in any way, because I took this out of one of my own machines that I tore down for parts when I also took out the other gears from the mechanism. So I've got that one as well as the main cam and the slide and this one that I took out of one of my own machines that I tore down because I needed the heads out of it. So I scrapped the rest of it and gutted the rest of the chassis. So I do have the replacement blue gear, but I also have an original white gear, which is, well, it's the same as the other one, just a different color. The aftermarket ones, I started making them out of blue plastic, like this top here, right? But I don't know that one's any better than the other. But that needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. We'll start by lubricating the P6 guide post, which causes these to eat tapes. It also causes them to break the pinch roller if it gets caught. But it's not broken on this one. At least not at this point. Damn reflections, you know. Either this bench is getting higher or my chair is getting lower. Get the feeling that my chair has lowered down a bit. So we'll just raise that up. That's a bit better. I tell you, these shop chairs don't seem to last very long. They have an air cylinder on them, and I guess after, when you've got them extended up all the way, after rocking back and forth on them a bit as you move around, they tend to lose their seal, and then they start to just gradually drop. The next thing you know, everything's getting a bit higher. So we remove the nut that holds this in. It's an aircraft type nut. So there's no reason to put paint on it other than the fact that if you want to see if someone else has been in there, then you paint seal it. But there's no reason to do that. And then we're just going to remove the P6 guide by just pulling up while we're twisting it back and forth a bit. These seized up real good. This was a real common fault on this. The grease that they used at the factory was junk. And now we just have to clean the gunk off here, the old dried black molybdenum type grease that they used at the factory. That has to go, so grab some alcohol and a Q-tip, and then we'll clean all the crap off of this one. What I would generally do is I'll take a bit of the wet cotton and I will force it through using my little Sony screwdriver, which just happens to fit nice and tight. So I can push this through and clean out the crap that's inside the bearing. I'll use some of my lithium grease on here. Now, I will have to do the alignment on this once I get this back together, because the tape, the height of it is critical, otherwise you'll chew up the tapes. But we'll get this on first, and then I'll deal with the gear on the bottom. We'll change that out. Alright, that's how that's supposed to be, nice and free. Again, I'll deal with that later. We're also going to lubricate the pinch arm post and cam. So we'll just put some grease in here. And on the cam, the tower gear as it's called, put a little bit there, that's all we need. The alignment of this is critical, so if you take it off, you've got to make sure you get the alignment correct. You'll see that there are alignment marks here. You can see them pointing at each other, right? So I'll make sure that that is set correctly, otherwise it will not thread correctly, but that's how they're set up. You've got an alignment mark on one and on the other. So if you're like that, you're wrong. Like that. Or possibly one over. Alright, now we'll deal with the lower chassis. So let me get the bottom off the unit. The number of these machines I saw when they first came out was just staggering. It wasn't that they're a particularly bad machine, they're actually a very good machine. But the numbers that they sold when Sony made the switch to VHS, it was very anticipated because the rumors had been around for a while that they were going to switch to the VHS format. So there were tons of people that were waiting to get one. And when those first VHS machines came out, we couldn't keep them in stock in the shop. They sold like hotcakes. We probably sold, at the shop that I worked at, we probably sold 100 of them within the first couple days that they hit the market. Like, there were people that were Sony fans that were just waiting. And when the truck rolled up with them, we had people that were on the waiting list. So the sales reptiles, as we call them, would get on the phone and phone their clients and say, hey, the new Sony VHS machines are here. And many of them sold without people even seeing them. Oh, can you bring one over? I remember when they first showed up, our delivery guy was just busy, one after another. He'd get back from the shop and they'd say, okay, you're on their way out the door again. Got another one to go. They're pretty popular. And of course then they started to break. And that kept us busy. This one's got a blue gear in it. It's broken. I don't think it's been changed before because that zip tie I had to cut. But this one's got a blue gear on it. I got a white gear to replace this one with. That's just because that's what I had at hand. So they're pretty easy to change. We've done them together before. We'll do another one. This is how quick these can be changed. You pop out the 3 little cut washers. Lift off the retaining plate. Lift off the cam gear. Sometimes the cam gear breaks too, but not too often. Usually that broke. What caused this to break was when that guide got stiff on the loading cycle. It would break. If it got stuck when it was loaded, then the tape would get caught and it would eat the tape. Could lift this one up out of the way for now. I don't have to take it all the way off. Just lift it up enough that I can remove the broken gear. Broken pieces. And I gotta remove this one. Now I'll just take off this clip. They'll drop the guide out, but it's easy enough to put back on. I probably don't even need to do that. I can just pop this out, but it's easier if I actually remove the cut washer and drop the guide. Okay, there's the broken gear. Lift off the broken piece. How this is held in place is there's a spring that is loaded in behind here. So if I turn it to that position, I can lift it off. Get the spring out of there. Get the spring into the new one.
Like that.
Catch the spring in behind, pull it forward until it locks into place like that. And that's what holds the gear in place. Now I can place this back on. Lift this other one up out of the way a bit. Got to push the guide up from below. Put the guide back on. Put the linkage back on, and the cut washer. Okay, that holds the guide in place. And we verify that the guides go all the way to the front of their track, which they're not aligned yet. We have to align these 2 holes here. There's a hole there. Has to line up with the other one, like that. And when we bring the guides back, make sure that they come back all the way and don't stick on anything. When we are in the fully unloaded position, you will notice this hole here lines up with a hole in the chassis, and this cutout here lines up with that hole there. That's in the unloaded position. So when the guides go up, they go up evenly. It should reach the top of the travel at about the same time, just like that, you see. That is timed correctly. To bring them back, we have to pull back on the guide here. This is the back tension guide, and they will pop all the way back. Now we also have to make sure that our alignment is correct for everything else. There'll be alignment holes that line up on all the different pieces here for when we're in the unloaded position. Those alignment holes are as follows. You'll see them, one down there, one there, that lines up with those. This little arrow points at that little dot there, right? That's showing that the mode switch is lined up and the main cam is lined up. Then what we have to do is install the main cam gear, which is this white gear, and we have to make sure that all these other pieces are lined up with their appropriate holes in the chassis. You'll see there's a hole right below here. We'll see them all through these cutouts on the gear. So when I line up the main cam gear, we're going to drop it in place like this. When we're correctly aligned, you will see the little cog here, and you'll see another little one over on this side here, and one here, and you can look down through that hole and see down through the chassis. And we just move the little green little lever over to make sure that lines up, and the same for the other cogs over here. Just once it drops into place, you put on the back plate, and the 3 cut washers go back on. Now, I'm not saying that this is all that's wrong with this machine. I don't know. I haven't plugged it in. There may be power supply problems too. I won't know until I plug it in, but one thing's for sure, I have to, oh, it's interesting. Feels like that pin pushed through from the other side. Did it push through? It did. Plastic. The plastic chassis is moving. The pins. That's to be expected on a machine that is, well, this is probably, what, 30 years old? What year did this come out? 94? I forgot what year this came out. Anyway, that pin had moved slightly on the other side. Shouldn't be that big a deal. It might be worth investigating as far as trying to secure it. What happens is the plastic, these plastic collars, they can crack because the plastic shrinks over the years. Been reading a few comments lately from people that seem to think that that VHS is going to make a comeback. I have to laugh because VHS and tape in general is not going to make any comebacks, despite how much some people would like to see it. It's not going to happen. It's the format is done. Get your tapes archived and move on. That's, maybe some people don't like to hear that reality, but its days are done. You know, I probably should have cleaned this mode switch while I was at it, so let's just do that. While I've got this apart, we'll just pop these screws out again. Wishful thinking. Okay, mode switch just pops apart. Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit grimy. Get our neutral contact cleaner out. I will put a little bit more on here. I'll just put another little, actually probably don't need to because there's still a fair bit on there, but we'll just give it a little shot. This is just to keep the contacts from being exposed to the air. Spin it around a bit and replace the switch. Again, setting the alignment correct. Gonna line up the little hole here with the timing mark. That's the correct timing. And I gotta pull this. You can see what I did there to make it drop down into place. But I gotta pull this little pink lever over, and then it'll drop into place. That's set correctly. Put the 2 screws back in that hold it in place. The spring sets the initial tension, and then you just tighten down the screw slightly. Don't over tighten. It's plastic. It will break. It's brittle. Drop the circuit board back in place. Plug in the drum and load motor connectors, and of course the connector on the mode switch. Okay, let's turn the unit over and we'll see if it powers up. Contact. That was perfect timing, wasn't it? I have no clock display, but I have power. I don't know that the guy that owns this cares about the time display. It's a fellow that's in the archiving business. I'll ask him if he cares about the time display. He might. But let's see if it plays first of all. That's the most important thing. Will it play? And the answer is, yeah, it does play.
Population suffers from some form of allergy symptoms brought on by airborne pollution. Recently, a growing number of new
Okay, so we know that it works. Actually, the owner might not care about the front panel display. Oh, I say that only because it has on-screen display. It has 2 sets of outputs. It has an output for the monitor with on-screen display and an output without the on-screen display on the back, which is good for digitizing and dubbing. So you may not care about the front panel display. It could be a couple of different things. It could be the display tube itself is bad, or it could be a capacitor and a power supply that's gone bad. Oh, it's not. It's the display tube. It is lighting up. If we look at it, I'll turn out some lights. It's going to be the tube. It's just dark. As you can see, the display tube is lighting. It's just that with all the lights on in here, because I have an incredible amount of light when I'm working. It's like a television studio with all the lights on it. It looked like the display wasn't working, but the display actually is working. It's a little bit on the dark side, and that is what happens with vacuum fluorescent displays when they're old, is they lose emission. They are a vacuum tube. They have little filaments that emit electrons when they're heated up, and they are heated. They have little filaments that emit electrons, and those electrons are attracted to the plate, the grid, through the grid and onto the plate, which is the anodes, which are the segments that are coated with phosphorus, and they glow. And after they get old, they tend to get dark. Maybe take the filter out so that it's not shining through such dark glass and improve the light level, but really it's not that important. If he's using it for timing his tapes, first of all, you can see it. It is not like it's out completely. You can read it, but there is the on-screen display. I don't know that he would want to spend the extra money to try to fix that or try to source a display. I probably have a display for one of these, but again, I might not. I may have sold it. I did got one of these machines, but I don't know whether I've still got the display. The last one I had a dark display, and I swapped the display over and it brightened up, but I don't remember whether I left it on the machine that went back to the customer or whether I took it out and put it back into my stock. One of the features that these machines had was a high-speed rewind. When you press high-speed rewind, it would unlace the tape, which was a great feature. I really liked Sony for the high-speed rewind because you could keep the tape laced like a beta machine and do all your fast-forward, rewind, search, etc. without having to wait for it to load and unload. But when you're at the end of the tape and you're going to rewind the tape back to the beginning, you could hit that high-speed rewind button right here, and it would unload the tape, rewind it, retract it, which saves wear and tear on the heads, saves wear and tear on the tape, and just rewinds it much faster. That was one of the features I really liked about Sony. And I still like Sony VHS VCRs. I've got several of them myself. I've got an SLV5, I've got an SLVR1000, and I got an SVO2000, which is the 1000 with some extra features because it was a professional machine. And I use those as spoolers for archiving because they do deliver a very good picture. And Sony was always exceptional on their picture quality. They took VHS to the extreme as far as their picture quality went. Anyway, this one here is almost done. I'm going to do a couple more things because, again, this is going to one of my clients. He does archiving work like myself, but he's not my competition because he's in another city. So I service his equipment for him. We're going to lubricate the guides because it needs it, and then get this one ready to go. So I'll just put a little bit of my moly coat, or not moly coat, my lithium grease. Moly coat's a trademark, but it's the same thing. It's a lithium type grease. Just put a little bit down here and on the metal parts where metal to metal contact gets made, because those are the parts that generally tend to stick the most, is the metal to metal parts. And load up another tape and make sure everything's still working like it should. Just like that. Couple things to do before sending it out. I'm going to clean the heads and the transport, and then we'll make another test. I could make a test recording on it, I guess. It's not, the recording is not the important thing because it's only going to ever be used for playback. Like all VCRs, that's all they should ever be used for, is playback. Oh, I got to do the alignment as well. I didn't check that. We're going to do this the height alignment for the P6 guide. Very important, because without doing that, we could be damaging the tape. So how to do that? How to do that? We load a tape. We're going to watch the tape as it passes over the guide here and look for any tape that's either folding on the top or the bottom, because that will determine whether the guide is too high or too low. So it's probably pretty hard to see on camera, but I'm going to watch the tape as it goes over the guide, and I can see it's riding down. I can see it pulling down. Looks like it's pulling down. But basically we run it forward and backwards in search. See, the tape is pulling down now. Well, actually it's pulling up. It's going down because it's been played, so I have to lower the guide down a little bit. So grab my pliers and we'll turn this screw down a bit. Still running up a bit, so the guide is still a little bit too high. You can see the tape riding up a bit, don't know if you can see it on camera that well, but it is still a little high. So we'll just take it down maybe another half a turn. And the same thing, we'll play the tape a bit and then rewind the tape. That's getting better. I'll show you what I'm looking at if I can get a shot of it. I'm watching the tape as it passes over the guides here. So, see, the tape's pulling down a bit. That could be the pinch roller that's causing that. It's straightened out now. But when I go into reverse search, I want to make sure that that runs relatively smooth and true. If the guide is too high or too low, for example, ow! Stick my fingers into the head drum. If the guide is too low or too high, it'll do that. Right? I just pushed it down. See? We want to run smooth and true. Like that. You see, now it's running true. We'll try all the modes. Fast forward. Rewind. Ouch. Okay, time to clean the video heads. For that, a piece of paper. There was a little bit on there, a little bit of dirt on those heads. We clean the lower drum with a Q-tip and avoid the heads, of course, while doing that. So we rotate the heads out of the way and clean the lower drum, especially along the groove there where the tape rides. You can do the upper drum with it as well, just avoid the heads. Don't go down where the heads are. You can see the heads, so as long as we stay above the heads. But I don't advise it just because people get clumsy and they slip down too far, and then the next thing you know, they snag the head with a Q-tip and rip the heads apart. And that's a bad thing. So I say stick with the paper, because you don't have to worry about breaking the heads that way. Color bar tape next. Verify that my color bar tape plays properly. Not looking too bad at all. I'll show you the other output. Clean. No on-screen graphics. And then the on-screen graphics output. That was nice on these Sonys, because if you're using as a dubbing deck, for example, you would have your second recorder or your capture device or whatever hooked up to the line out, and you could hook up your monitor to the monitor out, and therefore you could see where you were on the tape. You had your on-screen display. It showed where you were if you're fast forwarding to find out how long the tape was, for example, which is what I always do at loaded tape. At the beginning, I fast forward and look to see how long the tape is, so I can make note of how long I'm going to have to set the capture for. and then I hit the high-speed rewind and rewind it back to the beginning, and then start the tape up. I've got the on-screen display going to my television monitor, and the regular video out going into my capture device. It's nice. My old machine I used to use, I actually had to turn it on and off with the remote control. Turn it on to time the tape, and then make sure I turn it off before making a dub. Otherwise, I'd end up with the time burned into the copy. And then, you know, like, oops, you had to do it again. Anyway, this one's done. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.